as an author, a scholar, and someone who spent a better part of his life and more than he'd like to discuss looking at these types of things. Yes or no, simple. There's no way anybody can misinterpret. Do Masons worship or revere Lucifer?
No.
That's my answer as well. Welcome to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry channel. I'm Maynard Edwards, 33rd degree elect. Freemasonry and Lucifer. It is just the dumbest thing. Freemasons do not worship Lucifer. So where does the idea come from? Well, there are a couple of different answers to that question. I want to start with the one that most people point to when they say there's a connection between Freemasonry and Lucifer, which, by the way, again, is not true. And I'm not even going to get into the debate of Lucifer and the Bible, because the Bible never says that Lucifer is Satan, never says those two are one and the same. Those ideas come from other sources that are not scripture, but rather fiction. Dante's Inferno, John Milton's Paradise Lost. That's where the idea that Lucifer and Satan are connected as the same person or same being are. They're not anywhere in the Bible, but we're not going to get into that right now. Let's stick to the subject matter at hand. Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. This is the book that Albert Pike wrote down all of his thoughts on the various degrees of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. When we talk about people getting the 4th degree or the 18th degree or the 32nd degree, in here is where Pike drew out all of his thoughts on this. And a lot of these are lectures and sort of his lecture notes. And this was never meant to be widely distributed. This was meant to go to his friends as sort of his thoughts on the subject. But eventually he published it, and most Scottish Rite Masons today have a copy of this in some form or fashion. And they've been giving this out in Scottish Rite valleys for many, many years. This is the annotated edition by my friend Arturo de Hoyos, which means it's got all the footnotes in here, because when Pike originally wrote Morals and Dogma, he didn't use any footnotes. He didn't say where he borrowed certain things from. And there are certain quotes that he uses that we were able to attribute. And Arturo de Hoyos went through this book. It took him almost 20 years and found out every single place where Albert Pike gathered knowledge from someplace else. And he went through and he basically annotated the entire thing, which makes it a lot easier to understand, a lot easier to absorb, and it allows you to go to the source material and verify what Pike is alluding to. So there is a passage in here that Pike borrowed from Eliphas Levi, who was an occultist. And it's unfortunate the way that it's written. It is confusing, but if you read it carefully and you read the entire passage, it makes perfect sense. And it absolutely does not say that Masons worship Lucifer. And I'm going to read it in full disclosure right here. And it comes from the 19th degree. I got a bookmark in here. And it says, here's the heading of the paragraph: Lucifer blinds and deceives selfish souls with his, in quotations, light. The apocalypse is, to those who receive the 19th degree, the apotheosis of that sublime faith which aspires to God alone and despises all the pomps and works of Lucifer. Lucifer, the light bearer, strange and mysterious name given to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning. Is it he who bears the light, and with his splendors intolerable, blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls? Doubt it not, for traditions are full of divine revelations and inspirations, and inspiration is not of one age nor of one creed. Plato and Philo were also inspired. This is borrowed almost word from Eliphas Levi and the History of Magic, which was published in 1860. So essentially what Pike is saying in that passage is that Lucifer, which is translated as light bearer, is a strange name for the Prince of Darkness. However, the light that he brings is intolerable light. In other words, it's not good light, it's bad light. But with that light, he is able to blind feeble-minded people. So he is not saying that Masons worship Lucifer, or that because Masons use the word light as an analog for wisdom or God's wisdom, that Lucifer is somehow God to the Freemasons. That is absolutely not what Pike is saying. reading the entire passage, it's pretty easy to understand. He's saying Lucifer is the bringer of false light, and feeble-minded people can be fooled by that false light. That is what Pike is saying. Now, it's written in a very unconventional style, and if you don't read it carefully, you can very easily see how some people might say that, oh, the Masons, they worship Lucifer. It's not the truth. However, that didn't stop Leo Taxil from making a whole bunch of money selling that idea to people in France in the late 19th century. But to talk about the Taxil hoax and how it still haunts and plagues Freemasons today as the lie that will not die, I got an expert to join us. My dear friend and brother, Dr. S. Brent Morris. He's the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Freemasonry. He's a world-renowned Masonic scholar and also an expert on the Taxil hoax, which he wrote about in the book, Is It True What They Say About Freemasonry? It's a book he co-wrote with Brother Arturo de Hoyos, our Grand Archivist here at the Scottish Rite. And Dr. Morris was actually the editor of the Scottish Rite Journal for a number of years. He joined me by Zoom, and we talked about not only whether or not Masons worship Lucifer, but we talked about the Taxil hoax and how it still plagues Freemasonry today. One of the big things that we get, as you might suspect, is at least once a day, if not multiple times per day, I'm getting comments of Masons worship Lucifer. And as an author, a scholar, and someone who spent a better part of his life and more than he'd like to discuss looking at these types of things, yes or no, simple, there's no way anybody can misinterpret. Do Masons worship or revere Lucifer?
No.
That's my answer as well. So the question then begs, how do we get from Masonry to this belief that Lucifer and Masonry are somehow connected? And the answer, with a few minutes worth of Google searching, comes back with two things: an unfortunate turn of phrase in Morals and Dogma and the Taxil hoax. So which should we discuss first? Because the reason I wanted to talk to you is I was doing some Googling and I found a pamphlet you wrote a few years back called The Lie That Will Not Die. And I thought that that was the most appropriate way to term the Lucifer nonsense.
Here's the timeline. Pike writes Morals and Dogma. It is very pompous. When you read it, you can see from Art's references that 90% of it is taken from other authors. And Pike says that in the beginning of the book. He says, this is intended for my friends, for my brothers, and so I have not footnoted this or given citations as I should. And I am more a gatherer than I am an author. It is in Victorian style of writing, which is sort of pompous and wordy, so it makes it difficult to read. They don't write with the crisp efficiency that we do today. And Jim Tressner of Oklahoma used to make an excellent point. He said Morals and Dogma was really not designed to be read. It was designed to be spoken. So when you and I are having a conversation like this, you can't see commas and semicolons, but what you and I do in conversation is we pause, and that's how we insert a comma, a semicolon, punctuation. Oh my God, what are you doing? Well, I just put an exclamation point there at the end of that sentence.
I call this the your mama principle. And I think we run into this in modern context today. When you send a text to someone, inflection being everything, you can send a text to someone that says your mama, and they could interpret it as your mama, or they could interpret it as, your mama. It really depends on the person listening. And I think that this is where we are with Pike in the mention of Lucifer.
Yeah, well, that's the beginning. Then you have simultaneously going on over in France this business with Leo Taxil, and this is Gabriel Antoine Yogan Pages, and I'm sure that I've just butchered the French pronunciation of his name, but he was a free thinker which is the polite way of saying an atheist. He wrote pornographic biographies of the popes. And you can find on the internet covers of his books. He has one book with a woman who has been stripped to the waist, tied to a table, and a priest is standing over her with a whip, and he is whipping her or lashing her with this whip or cat of nine tails. It's not clear to me how much of this is motivated by dislike for the Catholic Church and how much of it is motivated by the fact he can make a buck. And so he may have been just as happy to have attacked the Bibliothèque Nationale if he could have gotten people to buy books about the National Library. He just wanted to sell books. So he is sued by the church. A fine is levied against him. And then all of a sudden, he claims to have a conversion. And he's converted to Catholicism. He gives up all of his bad deeds. He goes and lives for a year or so in a monastery. Now, it turns out that the Pope at this time, he was very suspicious of Freemasonry and had been issuing a series of papal bulls against Freemasonry, simply reinforcing the teachings of the church going back to 1738. Podges, Johann Podges, he starts writing books about his experience in the Masonic Lodge. Now, what's interesting is that he joined a French Masonic Lodge, made it exactly through the first degree, and then the lodge kicks him out because they find out he's a rather unscrupulous, unpleasant fellow to have around. And then it's kind of, oops, we made a mistake when we elected this guy to membership. We don't want to have anything more to do with him. He's now cooked up a plot where he's going to get even with the church for suing him for defamation with his pornographic biographies of the popes, and he's going to get even with the Masons for kicking him out. So he has his conversion experience. He goes and lives in a monastery for a while, does penance, and then he says, "I know that the Pope is concerned about Freemasonry, and before I saw the light and converted to Catholicism or reconverted. He grew up as a Catholic. He said, I was in the lodge. Maybe I should write about my experiences." And the guy who's overseeing his conversion says, "Sure, that's a great idea. The current Pope Leo would be very interested in that." So as he starts writing these stories about Freemasonry and its interaction with the church, the Masonic stories become increasingly bizarre, increasingly negative. And then he comes up with this story, and the story is there is a secret order within Freemasonry called the Palladium. And the Palladium was an idol of Pallas Athena that the Greeks had. And so the Palladium is a group of men and women. And he describes the initiation ceremonies. And, I do not mean to offend my readers. I don't want to shock the delicate ladies and gentlemen that may be reading this. But what the Masons do is so horrid, I must describe it in detail. Well, of course, the detail is pornographic. And then as the stories become increasingly elaborate, he introduces a character called Diana Vaughan. And Diana Vaughan is the daughter of a high-ranking Freemason named Vaughan in the United States. And there was a mystical writer named Vaughan in England, and he's a relative. And when Diana was born, her father dedicated him to the devil. And now Diana has decided that she doesn't like this, and she wants to leave the clutches of the devil worshippers and become a Christian. And so she is now in hiding. And the the hints are that she's hiding in France. So I mean, you can see how these stories are slowly building up. They're becoming more and more fantabulous. It turns out that that in one of the stories it's explained that the head of worldwide masonry, Luciferian masonry, is Albert Pike in Charleston, South Carolina. Now he's writing from France. We don't have the internet. There's no telegraph or telephone, so there's no instantaneous communication. So he can say almost anything he wants about Albert Pike in Charleston, South Carolina. The Bishop of Charleston goes to see the Pope and says, the Masons, may be strange guys, but they're not doing the horrible stuff that Diana Vaughan says they're doing. I went down to the location where she said the world headquarters of Masonry is located, the Luciferian Masonry is located, and there's no building like that there at the street location that she gives. And the Pope instructs him, as a matter of discipline, say nothing about this. Go back to Charleston and keep your mouth shut, because the Pope likes, this Luciferian story that's going on. Taxil keeps building more elaborate, more outrageous, more ludicrous stories about Diana Vaughan and hiding. And you then have the smart guys in France, and they're saying, we'd like to talk to Diana Vaughan. Oh, no, that's too dangerous. She's afraid to make herself known because the Masons would see that she's killed or harmed or something. Finally, it reaches the point, I think it's 12 years that he's been carrying on this hoax with, ever more elaborate and ludicrous stories. And finally, he says, I'm going to show you Diana Vaughan tonight. So he rents the Geographic Hall in Paris. And I guess this would be like us in Washington going to the National Geographic Society and saying, we'd like to rent your auditorium for the evening. So he's on the stage. The audience is packed with members of the press, with priests, with interested citizens. And he walks to the microphone and says, this evening, I'm going to introduce Diana Vaughan to you. It is I. I am Diana Vaughan. She's a hoax. He explains, why all of this has gone on and how much fun he's had making fools of the Masons and of the Catholics and of the Pope. He had an audience with the Pope. The Pope bought what he was saying hook, line, and sinker. And so there you have it. Now, his confession was put in a French newspaper, Le Frondeur. It's available online. And then basically everyone forgets about it. And then, at this point, everyone's embarrassed. The Catholics are embarrassed. The Masons are embarrassed because some of the Masons believed it was true. And they said, oh my God, how could we ever believe this? And everything is dying down until Edith Starr Miller, Lady Queenborough, she's an American who has married an English nobleman. She writes this book, and in there she explains the Mason's secret, and that is that they worship Lucifer. And for some reason, her book becomes popular in the United States, popular enough that anti-Masons start quoting her explanation that the Freemasons secretly worship Lucifer. And this has been repeated and reprinted, and it continues on. You just can't kill it.
Now, even after all of this, I know there are still going to be people who say that Masonry is Luciferianism or Satanism. But if you have any common sense at all, you crack even a page or two of this book and read it. If you read about the Taxil hoax, if you verify anything that we have said in this video today, you will come to understand that Masonry has no attachment to Lucifer or Luciferianism. Masonry is not a religion. It is a fraternity. So if a man comes to the door of a Masonic lodge as a Christian, he remains a Christian. If he comes as a Jewish man, a Muslim man, or a man of any faith, he remains attached to that faith. Masonry is a fraternity. It is not a religion. And all of these things get all mixed together, and then you add YouTube and Facebook and the internet, and suddenly Masonry is all about Lucifer. It's not true. It is the lie that will not die. It is the Taxil hoax. And really, it's time to let it go. Thank you so much for watching. And if you made it this far, please give us a subscribe, a thumbs up, drop your comments below. I know there will be many. If you're a brother Mason and you see the trolls, let's not feed the trolls, and I'll promise to not do it myself. I'm Maynard Edwards, 33rd degree elect. Thanks for watching.